Good morning, friends, and welcome. This United Lodge of Theosophists serves the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. ULT groups throughout the world are dedicated to preserving and promulgating the eternal message of the Masters of Wisdom. This message points to the path of finding within ourselves that perfect essence that we are, and in so doing, lifting up ourselves and all of life. We are invited to test the truths presented against our own inner realities and become those truths and all that we are and do. All are welcome to participate with us here at 4865A Cordell Avenue, Suite 230, Bethesda, Maryland, every Sunday at 11 a.m. Also at 12:30 p.m. every first and third Sunday of each month, we read and discuss selected theosophical writings. Being sustained by ULT students to the degree they commit to themselves only in terms of contributing resources and efforts, there are no admission charges. The only tie that binds us is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching. Theosophy, also known as God Wisdom or Wisdom of the Ages or the Science of the Soul, is a message of theosophy. Message of theosophy is embedded in laws of nature and is brought out from time to time as conditions permit. Robert Crosby established the United Lodge of Theosophists in 1909 to revive the message in its pure form as presented by H.P. Blavatsky and William Q. Judge. ULT is guided by its declaration of only a few paragraphs, which is printed on the back of our program. We steadfastly focus on the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self and a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. This is a lofty undertaking and does not leave the time or effort to take part in side issues. As we focus on internalizing the truth, whichever is. All are encouraged to make this divine wisdom a living power within themselves by assimilating the message and progressing by self-induced and self-devised methods of applying it as we help and teach others. Today's reading is from the Voice of the Silence, starting on page 75. Calm and unmoved, the pilgrim glideth up the stream that nirvana leads. He knoweth that the more his feet will bleed, the whiter will himself be washed. He knoweth well that after 7 short and fleeting bursts, nirvana will be his. Such is the Dhyana path, the haven of the yogi, the blessed goal of Shrotapatis crave, that they crave. Not so when he hath crossed and won the Arihanta path. There klesha is destroyed forever, tanha's roots torn out. But stay, disciple, yet one word. Canst thou destroy divine compassion? Compassion is no attribute, it is a law of laws. Eternal harmony, Alaya's self, a shoreless universal essence, the light of everlasting right and fitness of all things, the law of love eternal. The more thou dost become at one with it, thy being melted in its being, the more thy soul unites and that which is, the more thou wilt become compassion absolute. Next Sunday's topic will be personalities and individualities. And now for today's talk on the law of sacrifice.
Good morning and welcome, everyone. As the first speaker said, today's topic is sacrifice. Another word in Sanskrit for it is yajna. Spelled with a G, not pronounced with a J. And I would like to read it to you from the glossary as to what it really means. On page 375, this is what it is said. Sacrifice, whose symbol or representation is now the constellation Mriga Shira. It means deer head. Mriga Shiras means deer head. It is also a form of Vishnu. The Yajna, say the Brahman, exists from eternity, for it proceeded from the Supreme, in whom it lay dormant from no beginning. So, it starts at the top. What is Brahma? And we will come back to it. But you need to all go and look into the constellation Orion, because a lot of events in a human life is connected to that star cluster. So Mriga Shiras is the symbol or representation of Yajna in our universe, because it's a constellation. Our constellation is the Milky Way, but I'm talking about the fixed star system that composes these figurative outlines that symbolizes something for us. It is the key to the thrice sacred science contained in the Rig Veda verses, which teaches the yajna, or sacrificial, mysteries. So the heart doctrine and the sacrificial mysteries then are interconnected. As an introduction to the Atiraya Brahmana, the yajna exists as an invisible presence at all times, extending from the Ahavaniya, or sacrificial fire, to the heavens, forming a bridge or ladder by means of which the sacrificer can communicate with the world of devas and even ascend, when alive, to their abodes. It is one of the forms of Akasha within which the mystic word, underlying sound, and we talked about that last week, calls it into existence, pronounced by the priest initiate. We're talking about the hierophants of old, and I'm sure they also exist today, or yogi. This word receives creative powers and is communicated as an impulse on the terrestrial plane through a trained willpower. Trained willpower. These are all attributes that we are asked to cultivate. Willpower, and now you see why it is so very important. just so you know. So in Theosophy then, we are constantly emulating to obtain knowledge. Knowledge about the human being and knowledge about the cosmos, because we're a miniature copy of the cosmos, so whatever exists out there is also represented in us. So this knowledge then is also bound with a way of life, because without living it, as the first student said, that power cannot become a living power in us. And this is the key between all of the others and Theosophy, because it doesn't say accept it. It says examine it and see how that sits in your own heart. Does it make sense? Does it sit right with your common sense? Is it valuable? And then when you can verify it, accept it. So there are many, many students that try to solve this mystery of the heart, and then they turn away in weariness, because the way, the truth cannot be known without living this life. Living the life is a necessity in obtaining that knowledge, because the knowledge that comes to man connects him to the universe. So we are really being given the diva knowledge, or the knowledge of the gods, and we cannot access it unless we are going to put what we get, we're going to put it to good use for humanity, for beneficent purposes. So living the life then is essential. What else is necessary in obtaining that knowledge? Well, a lot of us lack courage to leap. Courage to leap, and I'm going to take this off. Now we have the red pen. Courage to leap. And the meaning of that word is, of this phrase, is sacrifice. Sacrifice is interconnected to that statement. So, that single word has been perverted to mean totally something else in this age. Because to most people, it means barrenness, deprivation, dust and ashes, or emptiness, or hopelessness. Why has this shift? It is known to those who gain the knowledge by sacrifice, because without sacrifice we cannot, that unconscious sorrow, sadness, and hopelessness that we all feel at times, in contrast, after we obtain that knowledge, to the inexhaustible hope and eagerness of life, there's just no comparison in it. Even though it is stated, because of the karma that we have gathered about us, we're going to find ourselves in places that look perhaps dark. But without knowing the inner life, we cannot look at the events in any person's life and know what that means. But why does the paradox exist, before and the after? To make sacred is what this word means. Sacrifice is to make it sacred. And it means we're going to take the corruptible and make it incorruptible. The temporal is going to be converted to the eternal, from that passage we read in the Voice of the Silence. How did this come about? Well, all we have to do is just go to the Theosophical compilation of all of the centuries as a background to see what happened. At the beginning, Christianity and the mysteries were one. But as the Gnostics were pushed out and the orthodoxy took place, this conversion came about. The degeneration of mysteries, what did it degenerate into? Religion. It became religion. Orthodox fathers made a religion out of the impersonal universal principles. They humanized them. They concretized it, carnalized it, and made it into a religion. Conversion of occult schools into churches. Occult schools were the ones that taught the mysteries, and during the temple ceremony, 30,000 people used to go into the Temple of Serapis in Alexandria. I mean, these were monumental events, and within the sanctuary, all those who were prepared and ready were taken into the sacred mysteries. What about adeptship, which is that initial step teaches that the neophyte eventually is prepared for adeptship through his own self-induced, self-devised efforts. Well, that adeptship became priestcraft. So, the sacrifice then that we need to know, which is to make sacred, degenerated into bargaining. Very important to understand this conversion. Became bargaining. At that time, sacrifice meant conscious, spontaneous, and intentional conversion of the material dross into spiritual gold, because this is what that conversion is. So, by dedicating the materials to higher usage, this is what was achieved. But eventually, through this conversion, it became a bargain with the priest or God, because now God is externalized, and that is where it went. So that what is personally valued is exchanged to something personally more valuable, and this is how this conversion came about. So let us look around. What is happening in our society? The businessman, taken as an example, sacrifices his time and energy. What is he doing it for? Power and wealth. The accumulation of power and wealth. But if you ask him, he rather inherit it rather than do all that hard work. What about the workman of our era? What does he sacrifice his 8 hours for? Food, shelter, perhaps a little bit of enjoyment, going to the movies or something like that. But if you ask the workers, they rather not go to work and find it growing on the trees. It's difficult to go to work every day. What about the parents that sacrifice their time, money, and vitality for their children? Why are they doing it? Is it for the affection of the children? Or is it to educate them so that they become a credit to the parents? Or are we educating them so that they support us in our old age? Or simply to remove the children's support from ourselves when they have grown? Well, this is the word used. As to describe what has happened in the process. Sordidness. Sordidness. In the name of sacrifice, sordidness. Sordidness. How many of us then make sacrifice joyously and intelligently because we know that's the right thing to do, against those who do it because they feel that uneasiness of conscience that I have been given so much, I should return a little bit of it. But sacrifice is no bargaining, because in the secret doctrine it is referred to as the creation itself, from what we just read. This is that spontaneous joy that brings the worlds into being. What is that called? What is that sound? Music of the spheres. The music of the spheres. So let's put these, I think they're very important to understand. Creation itself. And we'll talk about it. Spontaneous joy that brings the world into being. So it is the inherent necessity of life. It changes ignorance into intelligence. And what is that called? Eternal transmutation of darkness into light. What is that called? Evolution. So sacrifice is then at the root of our world. How do we explain this? Well, if you look into the principles presented in the secret doctrine and consider their reasonableness, this is, I think, what you will find. We're told in many passages in that book that the universe comes about through the intelligent hierarchies of beings, and she calls them Dhyan chohans in the secret doctrine, who channel this light into our universe. So the light of the higher realms is channeled into our universe through the Dhyan chohanic host. Can I rephrase this? These are hierarchies. And through channeling that light, they become embodiments of laws of nature. And they're under the supervision, so to speak, of higher than themselves, other hierarchies that are higher than themselves. But in the secret doctrine, they're referred to as our spiritual progenitors. This Dhyan chohanic host, then, is sacrificing its essence for what? To build our inner nature, because everything that we are, Atma Bodhimanas, comes from these hierarchies. It is divine, it is sacrificed on our behalf, because they give of their essence willingly, joyously, intelligently. They give it so that we may perceive that in ourselves or through ourselves in becoming like them. This is sacrifice. Who else sacrifices on our behalf? Dhyani Buddhas. Our individuality comes from them. There is a lineage for every human being, every nation, so forth. Well, who else? The Kumaras, the mind-born sons of Brahma, and there's a galaxy of them mentioned. And what is the galaxy? Capricornus. So these constellations are not just the star systems in the heavens, but they influence Earth life. So the Kumaras are the beings who incarnated in the middle of the third race and lighted the mind. This is sacrifice. They gave of their essence to empty human forms and in order to light the mind. And from one, then all the others could be lighted. But at first, they have to give it that impulse. So they sacrifice. These beings have nothing to gain. They already are at the epitome of, however you want to express that. But they give of their essence to lesser intelligences so that we may become independently self-conscious in understanding our world and moving in that direction. What about the physical body? Well, without the Pitar fathers, we wouldn't have one because they gave of their chaya. Or either this is a double H. Yeah, I think it's a double H. Sorry. Double H. Without this form that this body uses to build itself on, because the astral body is a copy of that chaya, this body would not exist. But once it comes into being, what sustains our body? Elementals. All these elemental lives, which are the lower kingdoms, sacrifice on our behalf so that we may retain our physical body. So sacrifice then is that eternal stream of life is clear and sparkling. If you observe nature, you would really discover it. For instance, sit and look at the squirrels. There's such joyous interactive process with nature. They bump everywhere, they flip everywhere, they only take what they need. What about us? We can learn from nature. What about the birds? What about the bees? Well, they have their colonies, they sacrifice for their young. The mother bird loses half of its weight to raise its chick. So the sacrifice then is continuous process. In all aspects of life, in all of the kingdoms, it occurs. But in the other kingdoms, it is a willing and instinctive working of the lives, giving themselves to the higher. But what we do with them is it's very important also, because we take them in. Do they benefit from that? What are we impressing them with? There's an article called Sacrifice in Food, I believe the title is. And it was really an eye-opener to read it, even though it is not directly the subject matter of this talk. Some of it will be mentioned. For instance, it is said, when we take food into our body, or what are we thinking? Remember, all these hierarchies are in us at all times. I have a mind, I have a body, which is my spiritual soul, and I have Atman. All that is at all times present. And in the Gita, Krishna says, I'm Ishvara in the physical body, right? Ishvara, spirit in the body, is there at all times. Whether I acknowledge it or not, it's there. Because I could not exist if it wasn't there. All the other powers that I use, consciously or unconsciously, are also there. So, when we take the food in, then what is it we need to be aware? That we are taking it in for Ishvara. Because without this power being present, we could not digest any food. Mr. Judge in one of his articles says, through this process, we get vital airs from the food. And the digestion is dependent on the fire of the one life. So, all these things that we'll put in, if we think of Ishvara, then we're eating it for everybody. Whoever needs sustenance from that food will receive it, because we are doing it universally, not personally. So when we sit at our meals, it's a point to consider as to what is coming in, what it is there for, and what we are doing with it. Because when the lower lives come in contact with us, we need to improve their impulse by giving it that vitalization that we can. We can uplift them. We don't have to send them back to where they came from. We can uplift them and give them a impulse. This is from the Secret Doctrine. It says, just as human beings, however ignorant of reincarnation and karma, are reborn again and again to work out the effects of causes which they generated in former lives, just as all human beings suffer as well as profit from the age or yuga in which we are evolving, in this case Kali Yuga, though most of them are not aware of the workings of the law of cycles, so also all human beings, however unrecognizant of the fact, benefit from workings of the law of cycles. The sacrifices of the hosts of higher intelligences and also sacrifice themselves for the benefit of the hosts of lower intelligences. So this is a give and take process, and sacrifice is the way of life. Nature knows this, we have forgotten it. And Ahi, the Dhyan chohans, are the collective hosts of spiritual beings, as we said. They're our spiritual progenitors, who are the vehicle for the manifestation of the divine or universal thought and will. They are intelligent forces that give to and enact in nature her laws, while themselves acting according to laws imposed upon them in a similar manner by still higher powers. They are not the personifications of powers of nature. This hierarchy of the spiritual beings, through which the universal mind comes into action, is like an army, a host truly, by means of which the fighting power of a nation manifests itself, and which is composed of army corps, divisions, brigades, regiments, and so forth, each with its separate individuality or life and its limited freedom of action and limited responsibilities, each contained in a larger individuality to which its own interests are subservient, and each containing lesser individualities in itself. And if you look under the microscope to the constitution of a cell and an atom, you will see this exact process going on. As above, so below. What goes above also happens down here below. So truly, we owe a tremendous gratitude to nature for what it provides and what it gives willingly. And This is the last statement. The maintenance of the right attitude and its unbroken expression through continuous right approach to all the problems of life compel man to recognize his own individual responsibility to all beings of all kingdoms, nature herself. The prolific Mother Earth, the cleansing waters, the vitalizing fire, the health-giving air, the constructive and regenerating electrical and magnetic forces, to all these is due a great debt. The color and fragrance of flowers on earth, the brilliance of distant orbs in heaven, the nourishment which plant life bestows on our bodies, that which the beauty and majesty of space bestow on our minds, to them we owe a mighty acknowledgement. Men recognize obligations for kindness done and service rendered by fellow men. We have not yet begun to realize our responsibility and duty to all the kingdoms of nature. It is necessary for us to contemplate how invisible and visible aspects of all nature flow into us, and how from us radiate beneficent or baneful influences to every kingdom, and literally to the four quarters of space itself. He who enjoyeth what hath been given unto him by the gods, and offereth not a portion unto them, is even as a thief, says the Gita. So then, we sacrifice for the benefit of the other. As we receive, so we also give willingly, intelligently, and joyously. And now we will open it for questions.
I am.
Just a minute.
Sorry about that. It's so tiny. I am. I like to draw a lot of my points based on my experiences, because it, like as you were talking about sacrifice, it just reminded me of just some things I had gone through during the week. And I get the bus home during the week, and there was this gentleman that's always out, you know, I think they call them, I don't know what they call them. They always have those little...
Conductor?
No, out on the street, they're beggars or something. I don't want to call them beggars.
Homeless
But
people?
yeah, yeah. And there's this one particular gentleman that was always there. And a couple of times I've, you know, given him something. But this one particular time, I had somewhere to go on my way home. And I was like, I got to get that bus. I cannot be late. And I saw the bus coming. It was like 3 blocks away. And he noticed me coming across the street. And I'm like, oh, no. Absolutely no. I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. Because when I first saw him, he was homeless. He was homeless. His son was there, too. He had a teenage son. And I saw his son sitting on the bench. And that's what prompted me to, you know, give him some change in the past. I didn't see him this time, but every time I saw him, I would think about his son. You know, because sometimes they're begging and, you know, it's like, you know, they want to drink or, you know, it's just different things. And you try to be correct about, you don't want to support them in their habits. But then every time I saw him, I would think about his son. And I was like, oh. And that bus was coming. It was like 3 blocks away. And he's like, hi. I'm like, no, not today. Not today. I really have to get this bus. I said, no. There's a reason I'm in front of him now. The bus is not even here yet. And I charged across the street, and the bus pulled up right behind. I could see the bus turn in the corner. It's like, oh, well, that's all right. It's just, you know, this, you know, I understand that. And a lot of times, because I had been homeless before, and so I understand, especially as a female, how important it is for people to just stop what they're doing and just stop. and that is your moment right there. You don't have to think about it and guess. And the bus driver, he saw me. He said, I saw you. I didn't know what you were doing, but you kept looking back and forth. He said, I saw you, and I knew you were going to catch the bus because he knew me. And so he waited for me to cross the street. So, you don't lose anything. You gain by, sacrificing for people.
Yeah, absolutely. But also not to judge, because you don't know what they do with it, but that's not for us to judge.
Yeah.
There was a story, I think, told in that same direction. There were these three princes, and they were given a task each. And every one of them found some kind of excuse that they wanted to reach the end result, so they would not stop on the way and help anybody. And the only one that did was the one that reached the goal.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we learn and apply, it becomes a sacrificial necessity that you give what you have to others as well. That is the law. It's the law of compassion absolute. And it is inherent in nature, because nature does it, and we're part of nature. But we learn to do it joyously and intelligently, because if you don't use discrimination, that is not good either. But not to judge.
Not to judge and take advantage and do it at the moment that you have that opportunity.
You have
And the
opportunity.
small things really add up to big things.
Absolutely. Well, small duties of life, Mr. Judge says, if completely abided by, will produce perfection in the individuality, and the larger problems, he says, will never arise to bother us. That really caught my eye. The small duties that we think are not important are actually the most important, because that is how you grow. By doing all and everything expected of you, you fulfill your complete duty to nature and man all at the same time. So, and he says also that ability grows with time and effort. So when you're able to do greater things, those opportunities will also come.
Could you explain the spiritual hierarchies in relation to the constellations?
Well, not a lot of them are mentioned. Just as this student does research for specific topics, they kind of pop up. Orion is one of them. I think I put it up here. Yeah, it's not. It's this word. I will put it with the J, because this is how you read it. But it is spelled with a G, and that's why I put that J in. Okay. Orion. You can bring it up on your computer, and it brings the whole star system up, and look at it. Because she says that the form of or symbol of that sacrifice, because we just read it, it's from eternity that is present, right? And the form of it takes this constellation form, Miriga Shira, and it means dear head. Look at it, because it is not just out there not doing anything, it's doing something, right? Because this endless and beginningless source is there. We might not be aware of it, but it does its complete duty to nature, because the intelligent hierarchies are also under the guidance of still higher intelligences than themselves, right? She says that the Dhyan chohanic host is like an army. They have divisions, brigades, families, and so forth. And each one gives of its own essence or individuality, but it is subservient to the larger individuality in that component part. And each component part is in synchrony with all the other component parts because they work in harmony. Our universe also has this hum at the core, and that hum is the music of the spheres. And the music of the spheres can be heard with the inner ear. When is that going to happen to us? When the inner eye is open, and what was that called? The pineal gland? It's the only way that we're going to be able to look beyond this physical aspect of our lives to what is behind it. And what is behind is the homogeneous substance. This student did not take it all the way to the absolute today because there's so much to be said in just this little bit. But you can go backwards to the highest possible, and that is absolute. And it has two aspects, and you have to look at it this way. You will take a coin out of here.
You taking a coin out?
Yeah. This coin has two sides. These two aspects are just like this. It's the two sides of this coin. One without the other does not exist. It's very important to put that in the mind because substance has never been created. Sorry, I'll go back to my thing. Substance has never been created. Homogeneous substance is behind everything. As it descends, it's a spiritual fluid, whatever that means. This student does not know. I'm simply making the statement from the secret doctrine. Once you can perceive it, nothing can change that reality for you because it's your inner nurture showing it to you. So, substance is a spiritual fluid. It's metaphysical at this stage. And it's homogeneous. And on this side is this is called mula prakriti. I'm having difficulty spelling. Mula prakriti. This is Parabrahma. Right? This is the substance. Eventually becomes what? Matter in our world. As it descends, it concretizes more and more. It has 7 levels according to the secret doctrine. And when it comes to our world, we have matter. It's the most solid state because we have reached the most solidity. Now we have turned around and we're going to go towards the higher aspects of it, and we're going to become ethereal, less solid. Whenever that is, this is student does not know. Parabrahma is a spirit. And from that comes our consciousness, and you can list all of the things underneath it as to how it becomes self-consciousness in man. In the universe, there is no such thing. There's one consciousness. And to this student, now it appears that you kind of tap into it according to your powers that you have developed. That's the student's...
You tap into
You
Parabrahma?
tap into the universal aspects of that power as you develop those inner qualities in yourself. There is no such thing as that, this, or the other. I think there's just one, and you tap into it as a resource when you can. Because the master says, all is here. Take what you can. Well, what exactly does that mean? You know, you have to sit and kind of brood over these statements. And I think there's only one consciousness, and we just tap into it to the best of our ability and get what we can out of it. So we're self-conscious in the sense that We know who or what we are. We have continuity from one day to the next. But when that inner aspect of life has coordinated all our layers, and you look through one tube rather than seven, because we are seven, right? 7 colors. We red, orange, green, indigo, whatever. You're looking at it from that particular plane. But when all of them that get together, then you have the white light. All of those rays are in it, but you're looking at reality because you're not skewed by some principle being developed and another one not being developed, right? Because in the human being, something is superior to something else. Say in me, it is mind, lower mind. Say in you, it is jiva. In you, kamamanas. So we have developed one aspect superior to all the other aspects, and your perception is tinted by what you perceive through that color. Every one of us is that way. But with this process of learning and assimilating, those things eventually coordinate themselves. As we one by one overcome our difficulties, just like your consciousness was saying, that little voice, no, my getting on the bus is not as important as helping this person first. You put the other's welfare, that is sacrifice. So this is what we are being taught slowly to do, willingly and intelligently. But this, you can take it all the way up to the absolute. It's in the secret doctrine, and it's not like it's not given, but to understand it, it takes effort.
What does it mean by mind-born son of Brahma?
Sorry?
What do you mean by mind son born of Brahma? Mind-born son.
Sons. In other words, they did not have any physicality about them. No physical birth.
And
They were born from the mind of Brahma.
And Brahma
Is the supreme essence. And there's a whole constellation, Capricornus. Sorry. There's a whole constellation, Capricornus is designated to the Kumaras in the secret doctrine, is mentioned. Capricorn of the zodiac is their constellation.
is their constellation. So these spiritual beings have constellations.
Well, or maybe their essence corresponds to what holds that constellation together on the underneath side as an essence. Just like the world, our globe grows and evolves inside out, there is an essence holding it together.
Yeah.
This globe, Earth, and it is subservient to all of the other globes. There's a region of Earth, according to the secret doctrine. This is, I think it's spelled that way, region. And this region is subservient to all of the other Dhyan chohans that are in charge of or give of their essence to all the other planets of the solar system. Our Earth also develops from inside out. It is not a dead planet, it's alive. All of those magnetic and lava formations, when you look at it, it's alive. It's constantly producing stuff from the core outwards. It's controlled at an archaic level, but nevertheless it's growing inside out. And what we do on its surface is very important. Are we protecting it or are we destroying it? What are we going to emulate to have in the future, for instance?
And Mula Prakriti.
Mula Prakriti, yeah.
Mula Prakriti
Yeah.
Is the substance behind everything?
Well, it cannot be considered substance at a stage, HPV says. It's a metaphysical concept.
Yeah. Primordial matter, is it?
Primordial matter is Prakriti. It condenses,
Okay.
as it comes down, it condenses.
So Mula, it's absolute homogeneous.
It's there.
There.
It always is there. These two aspects are always there. One without the other cannot
Okay. So through consciousness, can man perceive what's behind him? And when I say behind him, the only way I can describe it in terms of what you're saying.
Essence.
Yes, I mean it seems that it would be man's quest to come into the realization of what's creation and what's behind creation.
Yeah.
And that's and what I'm saying is that the spirit, the Para Brahm and the Mula Prakriti together as being one essence that's behind man that makes everything up. Right.
Well, not sure we can say it that way. I'll have to think about it because of this duality we have. Because one aspect of us is substance, no doubt about that. The lower, I'll finish it in a minute, then I will answer other questions. One aspect of us, the lower aspects, are made up of substance. But in their inner essence, they're that invisible substance, right? The electromagnetic substance that this eye cannot perceive. But it's there because the sensitives can see your aura, whatever they call that.
Right.
Okay? So it's there. So when you develop your inner senses, you can also perceive it, correct? And this here said, as you become more and more one with it, nature opens its doors and allows you to have a glimpse as to what treasures are hidden in its bosom. This is a statement from here. So once it lifts the corner and allows you to look at it, you have perceived it. Can that experience be taken away from you? No. So this is why it is said the way, the truth, and living the life has to be a one sacrificial aspect. You cannot separate them one from the other because it will not lead you to perception of the inner reality at all. So the paramitas, the virtues, go hand in hand because as we purify ourselves and we consider the other person first, because we are by nature selfish, we're self-centered, because we have done it for thousands of years. But those of us who are awakening to this reality, who slowly are moving in the other direction. But it also asks this question. Let me ask it. I don't know where it was. I think it's in this one. I didn't say it. It says, and this is impersonal, this is the writing. No wonder, it says, our wisdom is still puny. A large part of our potential knowledge is still represented by mere faith, as with any church member. This will continue so long as our devotion remains secondary to our personal interests. You remember that first statement we put up here, the courage to leap?
Yes.
Okay. If we want to know why we progress so slowly, let us reckon up as to whether of our time we give only what can be spared from less interesting pursuits, or our money only after our amusements and luxuries are taken care of. In short, are we feeding the movement with the leavings or leftovers of our personal lives, not with their first fruits? If so, we must be content with the husks of the truth, the shell-like eye doctrine. What is far worse, we must forego the power to help and to bring certainty to others. We must resign creativeness in favor of the spiritual impotence. The way, the truth, and the life, these three cannot be separated. The attempt to isolate these phases of our divinity is sacrifice as men generally esteem it. Their conscious embodiment is the sacrifice which makes of a man a Mahatma. So, these are not just words. We said at the beginning that Theosophy is not words in or out of books. It is knowledge indissolubly bound up with a way of living. That's how we started this talk.
So, does that, are you basically, I know you don't have much more time, but I'm thinking about the birds and the bees out there, and I'm thinking of humans, man.
Mm-hmm.
Birds and bees in their world, this student kind of thinks they probably act perfectly.
They
By
act
sacrifice, by instinct, by sacrifice, and so forth. But we have all these other factors that we have to work through. I mean, we're in training to become humans. That's what I'm just
Humane.
seeing
We're
now.
in training to become humane.
We're humans
and
who are training to
exhibit our
become
divine powers.
right. To
Okay.
get together the aspect of sacrifice, of discrimination, and these other factors that play into the process. And this is our opportunity to learn when we're here in the body. Figure out how to do that. And
Okay.
to act
We can't-
instinctively in a humane way.
Okay, the lower mind, the intellectual mind, can find any excuse to do it or not to do it. It is so very well developed and cunning that it can move you either way. What makes the difference is you're standing up and saying, where is that impulse coming from? Is it altruistic? Is it coming from our higher divine aspect? Or is it coming from the lower kamic mind? That kamamanas is passion oriented, passion and desire oriented. And it will move the personality to fulfill that. If you go that way, then you don't belong here. Because this requires that the three go hand in hand. Meaning you don't belong here, meaning that you haven't arrived at this stage yet. Yes, we can do all these things. We can jump off the wagon and go do other stuff too, which a lot of the students do. It said here, do you have the courage to leap? This is the conversion of this word sacrifice into bargaining, because we're scared. We take little steps. We're scared to jump into it. You know, if the little steps don't work, do something else and see what that brings. That's also a choice. What about these individuals that their pictures are on these walls? They gave everything to the movement. That's why they knew. They learned it because they sacrificed everything that they were and they had to the movement. This is the other aspect of it. Either HPB was and is their representative in the world, and this philosophy she brought into the world came from them and is real, because it's a spiritual, it's real, vital, energetic, or it isn't. You can't have it both ways. You cannot say, I'm going to follow the truth and the way and not live the life, because they lived it. They knew what the truth was because they lived it every single day. They sacrificed the personal to the impersonal. They sacrificed themselves for humanity. So if you want to learn, then we have to follow in their footsteps to the best of our abilities. Thank you.